struggles. But as this administration has seen, as we are seeing, people are not just going to roll over and let the country devolve into an authoritarian state. And we are seeing this sort of inherent conflict, what has been the story of Trump 2.0 so far, to my mind, come to a head tomorrow, in fact. Donald Trump is holding a North Korean-style military parade, Soviet-style military parade through the nation's capital, something that we just don't do as a country. Like the last one we did was after the first Persian Gulf War, which was celebrating the end of a war. We don't have that here. It just so happens to fall on his 79th birthday. He's even fundraising from it, if you could believe it. Well, you can, of course. Sending out this email with the subject line, quote, "Please help me before my military parade." I'm sorry, that's a funny sentence. My military parade. And of course, Donald Trump has already promised, quote, "very heavy force against anyone who would choose to protest his special day." He didn't direct this at rioters or looters or people that broke the law. He said protesters would be met with very heavy force. And so it's not surprising that in places like, say, Florida, officials are out there talking like this.
If you throw a brick, a firebomb, or point a gun at one of our deputies, we will be notifying your family where to collect your remains at, because we will kill you graveyard dead. We're not going to play.
If somebody's in front of you and they're threatening your vehicle, you just drive.
Regardless of the threats, there will be enormous peaceful protests tomorrow, all across the country. In fact, from coast to coast, there will even be a few international protests in solidarity against Donald Trump's desire to rule like a king. In fact, we've been seeing a lot of protests against Donald Trump lately, and you might not know this if you watch the news, right? Writ large. There's this organization called Waging Nonviolence that actually tracks this, and it's a very scrupulous accounting. I got to say, I know the people that do it. They're academics. They're serious folks, right? So look at the blue line on the top. Those are organized nonviolent protests in 2025. They are far outpacing the same metric during Trump's first term. That's the green line on the bottom. More mass mobilization happening. Anecdotally, we are seeing report after report after report. I mean, truly, dozens a day I come across showing that regular people of all kinds of different politics and ideologies, even people who voted for Trump, are just not happy about his indiscriminate mass deportation scheme. Voters may support deporting those who have committed serious crimes. The polling would indicate that that's true. What is clear they do not support is deporting friends and family members and their neighbors and their coworkers and chasing people through strawberry fields and their employees. People who, in many cases, have lived here for years. In one case of an individual I saw today, he's been here 30 years. He's got kids and grandkids. And again, this isn't conjecture. Polling bearing this out. Earlier this week, Quinnipiac released a poll showing Trump underwater by double digits on both immigration issues and deportations specifically. Today, a new Reuters poll showing much the same. Voters by a margin of 9 points think Trump has gone too far with his deportations. They disapprove of the government arresting local officials who interfere in immigration enforcement by 14 points. They disapprove of how Trump has handled the Los Angeles protests by 15 points. Which is to say, it often doesn't feel like it, but the mass mobilization against Donald Trump is working. What this government is doing is unpopular with broad swaths of Americans. And the more people draw attention to it, the more unpopular it becomes. Time and time again, we've seen the people and courts and some key institutions force Trump to retreat. Here's an example. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is back in the United States. He's released from that mega prison in El Salvador, shipped off with no due process whatsoever, even after the Trump administration insisted multiple times that would never happen. He's never coming back. Today, after months of protest, he got a day in court, a U.S. court, where he pleaded not guilty to the charges this DOJ brought against him, and he will be able to enjoy due process as he is entitled to. In Washington, we got word that Senate Republicans have altered a portion of Trump's bill there that would have limited the court's ability to rein him in. They did so after folks across the country from Nebraska to Iowa showed up to town halls to tell the representatives about that provision the House put in. No way. It's going to require this kind of democratic force and mobilization against the Trump administration constantly. And believe me, I know it is exhausting. this is year 10 that I'm covering him. But there will be a million more small victories along the way, starting tomorrow when regular folks across the country, in small towns and big cities and everything in between, organize with a simple message: no kings, not ever. Lorella Praley is the co-president of Organization Community Change. It's one of the leaders of this weekend's No Kings demonstration. She's been very active in the planning. Michelle Goldberg is, of course, my good friend and opinion columnist from the New York Times, where she writes today, progressives need a global movement, and they join me now. It's good to have you both here.
Thank you.
Lorella, just tell me a little bit about what the organizers for tomorrow's protests are envisioning, what you're hearing, what the amount of reaction looks like.
I think we're expecting protests all over the country. I mean, you saw the map, small towns, rural America, in big cities. And I think what we're seeing is people saying enough. No kings in the United States of America. And all of these protests are happening on the heels of an escalating few weeks where they are overreaching. They are full force in elementary schools, at Home Depots, now also reportedly today going to parks, picking up nannies and the kids that they are taking care of, to deport undocumented people. But actually what we're seeing across this country is them targeting anyone who looks like me, anyone who is Latino or brown and beyond in this moment. And so I think what we're going to see tomorrow is people saying that is not who we are. They're going to stand up, push back. And that's the kind of thing we need, because no one is coming to save us. In an authoritarian breakthrough, the only backstop is us, the people. And that's what you're going to see tomorrow.
You know, one of the things that they do in their toolkit is project supreme confidence all the time, right? And I have to say, it can be quite effective. Like, there were all these stories, you know, and I think they were probably true of, like, Trump people, like, thrilled with how Los Angeles is going. Like, ha, we have you, you dumb libs. You've walked right into our trap.
And can I just say that the mainstream media falls for it often,
all
right?
the time.
You constantly be like, oh, this isn't going to be good for Democrats. You know, how are Democrats going to answer the kind of 10 people who've thrown a rock or set a Waymo on fire?
And then it's also gratifying to me, like, when I saw a senator being wrestled around, I'm like, that doesn't, I mean, I'm not the median voter, but I don't think people like that. That doesn't look good. And, like, Donald Trump spent today making ludicrous and inflammatory claims as he tries to justify sending the U.S. military into an American city against the wishes of the city's mayor and the state's governor. California's 2 senators also weighed in with a letter to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth today. A decision to deploy active duty military personnel within the United States should only be undertaken during the most extreme circumstances, and these are not them. That this deployment was made over the objections of state authorities is all the more unjustifiable. Senator Adam Schiff, Democrat of California, and author of that letter, joins me now. Senator, are you clear on the legal authority, whether it actually exists, that's being claimed by the White House to send those 700 active duty Marines into the state of California?
I don't think the legal authority exists, and it's not clear that the administration has even articulated the basis under which they're doing this. First, they said they were relying for the countermanding of the governor by calling out the National Guard on Title X authorities, which require the president to go through the governor, not around the governor, not over the governor, but also require things like rebellion, which are clearly not in evidence here. He has also relied sort of generically on his Article II power as commander-in-chief. Again, there are laws, and the Constitution does not permit the president to call out the military against citizens of the United States or to call out the military for law enforcement purposes. They keep throwing around the term insurrection because they may want to rely on the Insurrection Act, but they hope these highly charged terms like rebellion, like insurrection, can put some kind of legal gloss on the lawlessness of their actions. And Chris, I think it all comes down to something the mayor pointed out quite rightly, and that is the president betrayed the promise that he would focus on violent criminals who were here unlawfully. He hasn't done that. He's resorted to these indiscriminate raids of workplaces, increasingly, I fear, outside of farms, traffic stops, the Home Depot, grabbing citizens and non-citizens alike, and prompting protest, which you would expect. And because I think this playbook will repeat around the country, it's important we recognize this playbook Trump is using. Once there are protests, and there are always going to be some violent agitators And, violence has no place in this. It ought to be condemned. It is condemned. Anybody using violence should be arrested and prosecuted. But the president wants these confrontations so that he can call out the military in other cities in America as part of his would-be dictator playbook. And we need to be aware of what we're seeing in L.A., this abuse of the military, we are likely to see everywhere.
Do you think there's reporting about sending tactical units to a variety of cities that are run by Democratic governors, that this is essentially a kind of provocation, that they're trying to recreate conditions of, the 2020 protests we saw in George Floyd and produce a kind of casus belli for larger crackdowns?
I do think this is part of what they aim to do. I mean, this administration began with the pardoning of hundreds of people who attacked police officers. So in order to somehow reestablish their credentials as a law enforcement party when they betrayed law enforcement in the president's first acts in office, they want to somehow create this confrontation. I think they would be delighted if it were a nationwide confrontation where they can somehow claim they're the party of law and order when they are, in fact, the party of chaos and disorder. But I think that's part of what they're trying to achieve. We need to keep speaking out in favor of peaceful protest against any kind of violence directed at law enforcement, but also against abusing the military this way. We in California, like in most states, love our National Guard. They're there for us in wind and fire and hurricane and flood. We cherish our relationship with the Guard. Likewise, we have the greatest respect for the Marine Corps, and we don't want to see those forces abused in this way. It would only erode public trust in those important institutions.
The president, of course, has broken with tradition to create this unprecedented military parade in peacetime on Saturday in Washington, D.C. It's also his birthday. He threatened today explicitly the use of, quote, I quote him here, very heavy force against, quote, protesters. The protesters of this would be met with very heavy force. What do you think of that?
Well, this is kind of classic would-be strongman kind of talk.
Folks, Trump's parade has been ruined, right? Like, let's be clear. One, everyone's exposed it. A lot of Republicans are against it because of the cost, at least. Some Republicans, the few principled Republicans, I guess, that exist, are against it because it really does feel like a thing like some dictator in some country would do, right? Like, it is kind of a thing a totalitarian would do. And so if you're a don't tread on me conservative, the president having a birthday military parade kind of makes you look like a hypocrite if you back him, right? But the big thing is that I don't know, who knows what the numbers are going to be, but the protesters are shutting it down. There could be more protesters there than spectators, right? We've seen this before where Trump has had some of his worst events and there's been more protesters there, or more media there. I think that this has already been ruined for Trump because he honestly believed that this term was going to be different, that people would at worst ignore him and at best actually start to love him, right? He really did believe that. And he thought that the entire of the whole country, hundreds of millions of people were going to love this parade. And it would be the biggest crowd in American history and all of that. Glorifying him. And that's not happening. People across the spectrum don't like this for a lot of reasons. And I think even if the parade happens, it's been ruined and shut down by you, the people.